Hello, everybody. Welcome to Just Among Friends. I'm Lori Hines. I'm your co-host here with Mike Isley of Texans for Israel and Ann Stacy of Texans for a Safe Israel. I'm excited to bring you another presentation today. We have a very special guest speaker today, and I'll introduce him in just a second. Before we get started, I have a few remarks. I just want to welcome everyone who's watching this. We are a group of friends of Jewish and Christian people, and our mission here at Just Among Friends is to enlarge our circle of friends between Christians and Jews based on our shared Judeo-Christian values. We acknowledge we have a few theological differences, but that's okay. We don't worry about imposing any of that. We're just here for friendship and to stand deeply committed to the Jewish people and the land of Israel. If you are watching this, or if you want to watch future speakers, we will be posting our announcements on social media. The Zoom link will be provided, so you can just join us from that Zoom link. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at atasteofisrael@gmail.com, atasteofisrael@gmail.com. I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Let me do a quick screen share. We have, like I was mentioning, dear Ann Stacy, who has a Texans for a Safe Israel. Please check out her website, texansforasafeisrael.org, and Mike Isley with texansforisrael.com. And if you are interested in the food and wine of Israel, you can check out my blog at atasteofisrael.com. Okay, so let's get started. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Bob Odell. Welcome, Bob. We're so excited to have you. Yes, my friend. I first met you, now we live in the same city, but I first met you in Jerusalem, believe it or not, years ago, a handful of years ago, about maybe 5 years ago now already. And so from that moment on, I've been keeping up with your work, and I thought you would be a wonderful person. Your expertise is on point of what we're trying to accomplish with Just Among Friends. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna interview you today, ask you a few questions, and I want to get started with your personal story, if you will. We have about 25, 30, 35 minutes. So I wanted to see, first of all, how did you first embark on this journey of becoming friends with an Orthodox Jewish person, you as a Christian with no hidden agenda? Can you tell us about the beginning of this journey, this friendship?
Well, I have to say that honestly, I took on this journey because God tricked me. He put cheese down a path, and like a mouse, I followed it, and I went someplace that I wasn't expecting to go, and I found some things that I wasn't expecting to find. Wow. Now, I just want to say this one thing. I don't think God is in the business of tricking us, but some years back, he gave me sort of a heads up. When he warned me, no, it's better said like this. He gave me an opportunity many years ago by saying, are you willing to follow me anywhere? And, I've been raised in the evangelical tradition. And of course, to be a follower of Christ is to follow him. And of course, that's what we do. But this question was a little bit different. Would I follow him anywhere? And it was such an unusual question. And after I considered this idea, and is it like a question like this would happen, every month? This was like something that I remember so distinctly. It was a major event at a turning point in my life, and when I said okay, I was struck by how little changed. It wouldn't be for many years that I would come to understand that I would leave high tech. I spent 25 years in high tech, and mostly working with the Jewish people, mostly working with Israeli Jews, but not Israeli Orthodox Jews. And through the course of that period, that 25 years, I could see God's hand in my life. And there came a time when I felt like something was going to happen, and this was the word that had been given years ago, that there would be something, there would be a different path. So in 2013, I left high tech. I willingly left high tech behind to follow something that I knew God was calling me to, but I didn't know what.
Mm,
And at that point in time, there was all this talk about the blood moons.
mm,
And like I was like a mouse for cheese on that, because you see, I had interest in astronomy. I was kind of a scientific, person interested in astronomy, and of course a follower of Jesus. And so when I heard about this blood moons theory, that there's a series of things that have happened in history that foretell that something that's going to happen in the future, I said, okay, this is something that can be tested. So I decided I'm going to look into this thing, and I'm going to bring all my scientific experience and how you look, and there should be a pattern here. They said there was a pattern over the last 3 cycles that this thing had happened over the last 500 years, but there were actually 8 of them. And so I went and I had to go and start to learn history. I'd read the Bible all my life, but kind of stops at 70 AD, right? So and so I had to learn the history between 70 AD and 1492, and when I got into that, I began to discover the reality of what the relationship had been like between Christians, followers of Christ, by whatever denomination or whatever, but the history was real and the history was awful. And having spent 25 years with an agenda to share the gospel with the Israeli Jews that I ran across, I walked for 25 years with that agenda, became completely aware for the first time in my life about what the true history was. It just rocked me to the core, and I did not know what to do.
mm.
That was the beginning of this journey, and I didn't even leave Austin, Texas for it.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. And it echoes all of our people here today, us sponsors of this, so much of the same rhetoric, so much of the same thought pattern and history, that we, on the same path, and we too have been wrought. So we share that change in
Yes.
course, with you. Tell us about who your first. Well, you're like me. I divide my life in 2 sections: before I went to Israel and after I went to Israel. And so after you had this change of mindset 25 years later, who was your first Orthodox Jewish friend?
Oh yes. So I had gone to Israel, and I went back and counted this up over time because people would ask me, how many times have you been to Israel? I don't know. I'd been so many in my high tech days.
Yeah.
So I counted on 33 trips to Israel over those 25 years.
Wow.
Couple of trips to Jerusalem and for touring, and my wife went with me on the first one. But then, with this new understanding of this history, I went to God and said, okay, what do I do about this?
Mm.
And God wasn't in a complete rush to answer, but some ideas began to develop in my heart. I've spent all this time getting to know high-tech Israeli Jews. They were mostly secular, a few religious, but wouldn't it be interesting to go back and try to live Genesis 12:3 in reverse? Because I'd worked with all these Jewish people, and our companies had been blessed by
Uh,
by the expertise and experience. And so I thought, if I've been blessed physically by being around, associated with all these smart people, could I be a blessing back to the Orthodox community? So what would be different? The difference would be going there without an agenda.
oh
And
wow.
so it was an act to go to Israel and look for Orthodox Jews that maybe I could be a blessing to. Now, how could I be a blessing? Well, I'd spent a lot of time in high tech. We started businesses. I know how businesses work. I know how to start organizations. Maybe there would be some Orthodox Jews that would be interested in, doing something. I don't know. As long as I could sort of agree with the general idea, I mean, I could be a consultant. So I went to Israel and I met a guy. I thought I could meet a lot of Orthodox Jews. No. But God led me to one guy, at least at the beginning. One guy. His name was Gidon Ariel, and Gidon had an idea to teach Christians about the lessons, the way that Jews perceive the Old Testament. And
Mm.
so that was a seed of an idea. I thought, oh, I could come alongside him and
Wow.
work with him. And I think God said, go make him successful. Go help him start this thing. So it was called Root Source. So we came together and did that. And it was a great friendship. But out of that friendship, I began to meet so many other Orthodox Jews. And it's like my whole vision and perspective about what God was doing and is doing in Israel began to change
Wow.
from that beginning with that one relationship.
That one friendship. That's amazing. I know we have a lot to talk about with that from that seed, that friendship. So I would say that's a powerful first friend to have. First
It
friend.
was a God-defined event,
Wow.
really. So, yeah.
Well, and that's where I met you. You and Gidon were launching that new business that you helped him, that you were consultant to that night at the Begin Center in Jerusalem. Y'all were launching it, and it was an incredible launch. I mean, it was packed. I mean, every top Orthodox person was there. I mean, it was a really well attended event, and I was blessed by it just as an onlooker. So I look forward to hearing more about this relationship. The next question is really a part of that first question, which is, if you can do this briefly, that's always a challenge. How has your faith as a Christian changed or been enhanced since you became friends with Gidon and other Orthodox Jews?
I would summarize that in 3 ways. More awe, more favor, and more excitement.
Wow.
More awe is what I just alluded to it, about a bigger picture, a bigger view of God. All of a sudden, after 50 years of touching many streams of the Christian faith, I felt like a little kid again, walking into a brand new world, looking out and seeing this whole new picture of what God was doing. And I sat there with awe. I also felt that my faith had been enhanced by favor. I have come to see and to believe that whenever a Christian is willing to come to Israel and or connect with Orthodox Jews for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of relationship without agenda, that God looks upon that decision with favor. And I believe that whether it's you or me or anyone who makes that decision, that God brings favor not only onto those possibilities on the relationship, and not only from what you might learn that you hadn't heard before, but I believe that he adds something special, a special ingredient in that, and that is the Holy Spirit. It's like a turbo boost or something. It's hard to explain. It's like a turbo boost of understanding, and I began to have questions answered that really had even nothing to do with Israel, but just there was just some dynamic of what God was doing there. So more favor. And the third one was more excitement. Now I've always been, people said, oh, you're kind of excited, you're an enthusiastic person, Bob, but I began to be more excited about the future than I ever had before. I had always looked at the future, at the end times, as sort of what's going to happen, and like what sort of wars, what sort of calamities. And yes, everything that's written in the Bible is true. Old Testament, New Testament, it's true. But there was a way of looking at it, which I had caught from the Jewish people, that they were looking at the redemption of all things, sort of the coming together, the concluding of the story, and how could that be anything but good? And so I began to be less worried about what exactly might happen in what order, and just be more excited about the fact that what is going to happen, it was going to be difficult, but it's going to bring great good, and we ought to be excited about that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Again, I share a little bit of that with you, actually a lot of that with you, but with the positive outlook on redemption, the process of redemption. And I've learned that from the Jewish people. That's exactly what I mean by echoing. I've learned that from them. It's a whole new perspective. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's very exciting and very inspiring. So this leads me to my next question, which is really about when we first started doing this, several months back, this Just Among Friends, bringing speakers in to share about the Jewish people and how they impact us in the world. It was during the U.S. presidential election, the end of 2020. And I've gotten several emails and comments about why are you focusing on this when America, because we're based in America, why are you focusing on Israel and the Jewish people when our country is falling apart, was the general sentiment. So what would you say to that question, given here we are months into a new administration and all of that? This is not a political based question, but it's why are we focusing on Jews in Israel when we feel like calamity is happening here, depending on your political position? What would you say to that kind of question?
First of all, I respect the question. And I believe that we have to live our lives locally. We don't live in Israel, those of us that are here on this call, and we might visit there, but we have to live our lives locally. And I do believe that, giving a cup of water to someone next to you, in your own city, that God looks down on that, and it's important. It's important to live our lives wherever we are. It's important to care about the things that are happening in our house, in our street, in our city, in our state, and there is nothing wrong with that. But God makes a statement about himself which is quite unusual, and almost it's like I would have never expected that this would be in the Bible. And in fact, I thought about this recently, and I asked somebody, did you know that there is, I said, do you know that there is only one time in the Bible when God says that he's looking at something continuously?
Oh.
Do you know what it is that God says he's looking on, and he never looks away from the beginning of the year to the end of the year? He never looks away from it. Now, if you asked me that, I wouldn't have known it except for having learned this from Orthodox Jews and so forth. But it's a scripture in Deuteronomy. Before the children of Israel are about to cross over into the promised land, God says, this is a really great land that you're going to go to. It has hills and mountains and streams and water, and the eyes of the Lord are on it continually from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now, every human being on this planet is of equal importance in the eyes of God. He cares. He loves about us all. He cares about every city, about everything around the world equally, isn't it? It's his. It's all his. But why would he say that his eyes are on it continually? I think that there is a certain humility that we can take on by saying that God has a big master plan going on, and it must have something to do with Israel. So yes, we live our lives locally. We love our neighbor as ourselves. But at the same time, we're living locally. It's almost like, I think there's something beautiful of seeing through what's happening in our own nation, seeing through to the even bigger purposes of God for the full redemption of the earth. And that cannot happen without the involvement of this land of Israel. And if God would even say that about the land, how much more would he say that about people? He loves people. So that's how I see it. I really don't think you have to trade one for the other.
I love that. That after being friends with Jewish people, it's not one or the other, like you say, it's both. And that's so important for us to really wrap our head around. Thank you. That's such a great response. I really appreciate that. And that gives peace because you don't have to give up one or the other. And I think that's a phenomenal scripture that really, I never had it framed that way. So excellent, Bob. Thank you. Okay, I only have a couple more questions for this interview. We'll have you again, and we'll do a second interview with you.
Love that.
So the next question, this is kind of political, but it's not meant to be. because this is not the focus, but you hear terms, speaking of the land of Israel, this we're going to segue into that, or the land of Israel, you hear in certain political situations the term West Bank. And it seems to be a hot topic. I mean, it is a hot topic. And but I want our audience, people who are viewing this, Jews and Christians, to understand what is it about the West Bank, and why is it called there, or what's so special about it? What is the significance of this West Bank area, part of Israel?
So historically, when the British gave the control over the Holy Land back over to the UN, they apportioned most of it to Jordan. And with a sort of a Jordan mindset, the Jordan River goes through Jordan, and the Israel was really on the western side of the Jordan River. And so that term West Bank began to be used in that sort of a Jordan-centric view. But we know that the Bible, in the Bible, God tends to use Israel. So it's Israel, and Jordan is the border of Israel, but Jordan is not the center. It is the border. And so today, when you use the term West Bank, there's sort of a mindset shift. Now, what would you say otherwise? You would say Samaria and Judea, or Judea and Samaria. And that's the biblical term. It's also the official term used by the Israeli government. They do consider that land to be Judea and Samaria, the two of them. And it's the biblical heartland of Israel. And someone has said, and I believe it, that 80% of everything written in the Bible happened in Judea and Samaria. So it's an extremely important part of the Bible. Those of us of faith it's great to visit there. And so honestly, if I'm with people that could accept the term Judea and Samaria, I'll use that because I believe that is a more proper term. I've met with Palestinians in the West Bank. I wouldn't, if I was referring to this land, I wouldn't mind saying the West Bank, if that's the term that they're using. We have to communicate in a way that people understand what we mean. But I would also not be ashamed to say we are here in historical Judea. So from the time of the Bible.
Okay.
So I hope that gives you a sense. Just one more thing. One of my Orthodox friends once said one time, how would California feel if they were described as the West Bank of the Mississippi? Oh. So anyway, it's a good one. Yeah, a little bit of just to give a sense of what it's like to be an Israeli and to have that term pushed.
Sure, the nuances are definitely should be part of the context, and I appreciate that. Very good. Well, I really only have one more question for this interview, and we'll come back and do a second part shortly. But this may be, I don't want to oversimplify things, but to our Christian friends who may be watching this, what would you say to them if they wanted to, if they're hearing all these, because we've had other speakers that have similar situations or similar stories where their whole perspective was changed based on some event. Mike and I have shared our own personal testimonies, and so have others. Yours was God, you sought God, and asked him, and not to change your heart, but to get, you wanted to go with him. And so what would you say to some Christians who are kind of seeking something more with God too, related to this in some way? How should they approach the Jewish people? How should they approach this whole topic? What would you say about that?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion. First of all, there's a lot of options for Christians, right? In terms of, there's books on just about everything. There's even discussion on what our relationship should be with Messianic Jews, with Jews who are following Yeshua, and for sort of sharing the gospel, but with Jews who do not yet see or yet see who Yeshua is, as we do. I think that what I would say is there are specific leadings that God gives. Now, it doesn't bother me that not everybody is excited and interested about studying the history of Israel as I am, for instance. I think that there's specific leadings and specific paths that God can have for people. But in this group, and in the context of what we're talking about on this forum, and even more generally, I would say that there is a work that God is doing to bring Jews and Christians together in a new kind of beneficial relationship, a productive relationship. And I would argue it like this: if in the end of days we're all going to be together somehow, some way, and these differences are going to be resolved, wouldn't it make sense that we ought to get to know each other first? So that's my thought, is why not, in view of everything else that you might be doing, why not consider following a path of relationship, productive relationship with Orthodox Jews, and see if God doesn't bless that as he has for myself and yourself, and Ann and Mike and so many, many, many others.
So many others. This is true. I appreciate that, because I can't remember who it is. Maybe it was Guidon. I heard him speak one time. He said, "Can't we just be friends? Like, we know there's an elephant in the room. Can we just talk about friendship? I mean, just relationship." And so I think it's so simple, but sometimes we forget that that is exactly a good and the right approach to this topic. So there's more to share, more to discuss. I want to have you back on the second part to this interview. And I want to share with our audience where all of this has led you in the last 5 to 6, 7 years, what we just talked about. So Bob, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on part 2 shortly. And we appreciate all that you've done, all that you've shared with us. Thanks for joining us here. Okay, take care, everybody.